So at our school, our Spectrum staff have found that students are less inclined to be civically active as they believe politics do not affect them. What would you say to those kids that believe it doesn't affect them?
Well, the first thing I do is have them read the editorial that you all wrote, reminding them all the ways in which the things that they actually care about, the climate crisis, student debt, public health, police injustice, racial injustice, are things that the only way you can make change happen or get the kind of justice that you want or the progress that you want is to pay attention to politics, is to engage in civic life, and is to connect the dots that way.
So moving on from that, in your opinion, what is the root cause of polarization in our current political scene, and what is the best way to go about depolarizing the situation?
Well, I think one of the deep root causes of polarization in the United States is this 50-year grinding inequality and concentration of wealth that we've seen all across the United States. It's a lot harder. It's much more the case now than it ever was before that what your chances are in life are determined by either what your parents' chances were and their income or your zip code. And that is not an American idea. We have a national politics where not only do we have only two parties, but we have an electoral system that in most places is 50% plus one wins. And so all the incentives in primaries and then in general elections is to get a base that is really extreme to show up in your primaries. And all the rules encourage polarization. They encourage appealing to the extremes rather than to a broad middle. And that's not some kind of unchangeable God-given thing. We can change our rules for voting. We can change the way we do primaries. We could move to a system of ranked choice voting to have more than just two choices. And all of a sudden you would shift the incentives for people and politicians to start appealing to the exhausted majority rather than to the most extreme minority on either wing. We have to address economic inequality. We have to do some democratic and political systems reform. And we have to be mindful of our own habits and change the way that we fail to see one another. And we have to choose to rehumanize each other.
So you mentioned an interesting topic there about creating social mobility through restructuring our economic system. How would we go about that? What kind of policies do we need to see for that to happen?
I mean, it runs the gamut from investing more in an education system so that those people who have the least access, frankly, people who can't go to Blake shouldn't have their life choices foreclosed at the beginning. You should be able to have a great shot at success in life if you go to the nearest public high school here in Minneapolis. Is really look at the ways in which we invest in American business and American workers. And this is not a Republican or Democratic issue. I think people in both parties right now are saying we've got to put a greater emphasis on manufacturing and jobs and skills right here in the US. Too much of this globalization and outsourcing of everything, sure, maybe it's made our products marginally cheaper, but it's gutted communities, it's destroyed mill towns, it's created holes in our whole society that are really hard to fill. And so we've got to take a multifaceted approach to a multifaceted crisis.
What do you think, just because it's election day, what do you think will be the legacy of this election on future generations and on future elections?
There is no outcome in this election that is going to magically make disappear all of the deep tectonic shifts that have been happening in American society, the grinding inequality, the dehumanization, the stress and social anxiety, the grief that runs through so many American communities right now, the pain that people are trying to kill, sometimes with literal painkillers and opioids, and other times with just a politics of entertainment and distraction. All those things are still going to be the case the day after the election, no matter who wins. We're still going to have an economy that is over-rigged for the rich. We're still going to have a society where people have stopped seeing each other across racial and religious lines as human. We're still going to have these deep divides of mistrust between urban Minnesota and rural Minnesota. All those things are still going to require us, you and me. I don't care if you're old enough to vote or not. All of us are old enough to pay attention to the people around us, to see each other, right? And the day after the election, we're still going to have to be committed, in fact, recommitted to stitching together a social fabric that is really torn in American life. And so I think the legacy of this election is to remind us that no matter what the outcome is, the deeper work of citizenship goes on. And that's work that's on us, not on a president.